risk assessment methodology. It includes those procedures and techniques that helps to assess the risk related to hazardous agents, that how much it will going to affect the human beings, animals, plants, as well as the environment. Now there are a number of risk assessment methodologies. One is the risk assessment scheme, which is conducted in a systematic or in a standardized way. Now in this scheme, we compare two or more than two variables, as well as these schemes are repeatable to increase the specificity and sensitivity of the results. The purpose of repetition and of comparison is to avoid overcomplications. Now the variables which we want to measure in this scheme are frequency of exposure towards particular pathogen and frequency of infection that occurs because of the particular pathogen. Then we measure the consequences of the disease, that what will be the after effects of the disease, not only related to the patients but also to the population and to the nation, because we know very well that because of the bioweapons, the basic function of the government gets crippled. Now currently, limited data is available regarding the frequency of exposure and frequency of infection, as well as about the consequences of the disease. So the question arises that how the risk assessment scheme can be used as a reliable method for detecting the risk assessment. Now related to biosafety, there are three types of risk that we're going to measure or assess. First is the risk related to human beings working in the laboratories, and the second is the risk related to human beings outside the laboratory, that is the risk to the human community. The third is the risk to the animals who are outside the lab, that is the risk to the animal community. Now we will discuss multiple criteria decision analysis. Now this method is very appropriate for decision analysis because here we are comparing two variables. One is the relative risk posed by lab practices and the second is the relative risk posed by biological agents. So here we are comparing two variables. So this is scientifically a sound method for decision analysis. Now different scientists and mathematicians have developed mathematical models keeping this criteria as a base, that is multiple criteria decision analysis. Then is the risk assessment. Before discussing it, let's talk about different types of risk. One is acceptable and the other one is unacceptable. Acceptable type of risk is tolerable and is totally understood. So risk assessment deals with it. It is a structured method and numbers of factors that influence risk assessment. One is the available resources to control the risk, कि कितने resources organization या nation के पास हैं और वो particular risk को रोक सकते हैं. अगर ये resources available नहीं हैं, then this factor is not influencing risk assessment. Then is the regulatory requirements. Regulatory requirements are required to make the risk acceptable, to make the risk understandable. So after making the procedures, we implement them and we go for regulatory systems. So regulatory requirement is required to influence risk assessment. Third is the value of work. That is very important for the community. It is again a third important risk that increases the risk assessment. The last is the technical assessment scheme, which is very appropriate nowadays because it first defines the accepted criteria, that which criteria, how much the level of the criteria should be there that is considered to be acceptable. Then we go for a scoring system that provides us with the results in the form of data. Now this calculation can be accepted to be very valuable in risk assessment methodology. After calculation, scientists have developed different equations that plays a very important role in building up the appropriate risk assessment method.